Hello and welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast from the WELT studios here in Fort Wayne at the Allen County Public Library. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Caleb Hatch. How are you?
Doing well. Yourself? Staying busy?
Same. Yeah, staying busy between work and home. And I know you are fresh off a trip to Chicago.
Chicago last weekend, so that was fun. A lot of firsts this weekend in IndyCar. The first oval race for the hybrid, the first win at Iowa for Will Power, the first oval win for Scott McLaughlin, and the first oval pole for Colton Herta. Unfortunately, all those firsts overshadowed by what we actually saw on track.
Unfortunately, it was a tough weekend on track for IndyCar, to say the least, and we're going to delve into all of it on this episode.
Yes, a lot with the Iowa races over the weekend. Race 1 saw Scott McLaughlin get his first oval win, holding off Pato O'Ward. It was kind of a twilight race.
Not a
full night race. Joseph Newgarden did go through the field. I mean, no surprise there. The real drama in this race, I thought race 1 at least had some intrigue. It Alex Palou crashing out on his own. He had a pit issue earlier in the race, so that upended the championship. And McLaughlin getting his first win. Race 2, not so much. You had no change in the top 8 until the lap 90 pit cycle began. This was just a parade. I don't know what else to say. To me, race 1 was at least, it had some intrigue because you had crashes and late race restarts and, the championship leader crashing out. Race 2, straight up parade.
It had nothing except for the crash at the end that I always say saved the event, but at least gave people something to talk about other than the obvious, in which there was nothing much to talk about in race 2. I think the biggest thing coming out of race 2 was Alex Palou bouncing back with a runner-up finish after crashing out on Saturday. We talked about this past weekend being very important for the championship either way. Another subpar performance by Alex Palou on Sunday would have really opened the door for Will Power or whoever else. He was able to at least finish second to Will Power in that race. Still a 35-point lead. I still think Alex Palou wins this championship reasonably comfortably. But if you want to take something positive out of the weekend, it's that the points championship race got a little bit tighter.
Yeah, a little bit. Not a lot, but a little. And the other factor in all this is Will Power got his first oval win since Pocono 2019, the infamous Pocono 2019
Yeah,
race.
The infamous 2019 Pocono race. Congratulations to Will Power. Team Penske continues their dominance. You predicted that Joseph Newgarden would not win
that I did.
An Iowa race, so kudos to you. But Team Penske did dominate as it has in recent years at Iowa, picking up both wins. One with Scott McLaughlin, one with Will Power.
And we each picked them to win a race. We just didn't go all in on both.
Right.
Otherwise,
correct.
We would have been spot on.
We were looking very smart, but that would be against everything else involving this podcast in terms of looking very smart. So the way it turned out, similar to what we thought, just not in the order we expected.
So I guess that's the lone positive, is that we predicted race winners correctly. So let's dive into our 3 things. I think the first one, we should just combine this because I think it's the first takeaway.
Yeah, I think it's the first take for both of us, yeah.
The racing was bad. And there's a lot of elements to this. Yes, it's the first hybrid oval race. Yes, the tires, there's no degradation of the tires. Tire deg was simply not there. And you had the repave and NASCAR putting the resin down. But the reality is they tested. They had a tire test here at Iowa Speedway back in June. You can go, I pulled up the article on IndyCar.com, and they tested late June, and Firestone did a tire test. So it's not like they didn't try to figure something out. Remember, coming out of the test, it was, they have fast times, And
yeah.
That was kind of all the buzz, and the hybrids blistering speeds, right? So they were going, close to 190 miles an hour for lap time. That was the info out of the test. And it's like, wow. But the reality is, once we got to the weekend, the fear of drivers saying, yeah, this is going to be a one-groove track and that's going to be one-groove racing and it's not going to be good, that's the reality that panned out.
Well, there's so many different angles to take, and it'd be easy to find one specific entity or reason and blame that one thing on what we saw at Iowa. And I don't think it's that cut and dry, because you look at when NASCAR raced at Iowa, and it was earlier this month, right? So since the test, Cup has been there. And whether it was the rubber they put down, did they put more resin down? I don't know. The fact of the matter is IndyCar needs to do a better job in preparing its setup, its formula, and that includes the tires, for races that IndyCar goes to at tracks that also host NASCAR. We saw it at Texas. We're seeing it at Iowa. We've seen a little bit of it at Gateway, and I think it's going to be a bigger problem as we go forward, is IndyCar needs to be more proactive, not reactive. Does that mean more testing? Probably. Does that mean more in terms of spending money to figure out what's going to work? And I think, too, the overriding thing, too, is there wasn't enough testing or at least research done with the added weight to the car. The added weight to the car is a huge detriment to what's going on in IndyCar right now through the first 3 races of the hybrid era. And we may have to wait until at least 2027 until that is rectified.
Yeah. And what's interesting, so I'm reading the IndyCar.com write-up on the tests that happened in late June. Graham Rahal has this quote, and he said, if we get 75 degrees when we come back here, it's going to be heaven for all of us, including all of you. But the reality is that's not going to be the case. Well, he's spot on there. But then there's this. He said, the hotter the track, the more deg, is tire degradation, you're going to have, the more the tires are going to fall off, the more challenging for everybody. Well, there was no tire deg, and that was after Firestone brought a softer compound going into the weekend. So,
and we really haven't got an explanation on Firestone on how it missed so badly. And make no mistake, you look at Indy Lights, and they couldn't run more than 20 laps without the tires coming apart. They had to adjust the race because they were supposed to go 75 laps on a tire, and they couldn't do it. It almost felt like they should have switched the tires. I know it's not as easy as that because different cars, but you had a tire that had almost no deg that could go 80, 90 laps on a fuel load and not have much drop off, which is probably what you needed for Indy Next with 75 laps, and then had the other tire be part of IndyCar's setup. So basically Firestone missed the mark in both series tremendously. Is it Firestone's quote unquote fault? Is it IndyCar's quote-unquote fault? I think there's a lot of blame to go around, but IndyCar needs to be proactive, not reactive with these things. They cannot afford stinkers, especially at ovals. Because what do we hear? More ovals, more ovals. IndyCar needs ovals, ovals, ovals. If the racing stinks, then nobody's going to go.
Well, and the good news going into the weekend was Hy-Vee renewed through at least 2025. It sounds like a multi-year deal. Now, it was not a guarantee it would be a doubleheader for next year,
which I'd like to get rid of.
And maybe that's an element that if you go back to a true night race, but then again, isn't it on a Sunday? Like, so that makes it irrelevant, correct?
Why do you go with a one Saturday night race? Obviously, the double headers are to fill the schedule. I mean, let's make no mistake. I mean, without the double headers, you have 15 races. Without the double headers at Iowa and Gateway, or Iowa and Milwaukee, excuse me. I get that. So
it is a doubleheader next year, but they said it was no guarantee moving forward that it would be a doubleheader weekend.
And I think the doubleheader is fine if you got good racing, but when it's stinky racing, it's brutal to watch. I mean, I was trying to find anything else to do other than having to watch that race on Sunday because I knew it was going to be bad. And for once, I didn't complain about the constant commercial breaks. Because it's like, thank God I can fast forward for 5 minutes and try to get through this race because it was terrible. I mean, Saturdays was bad enough. Sundays was even worse. IndyCar cannot afford to have these events. And I don't think there's enough of a sample size to blame the hybrids, but I do think we're seeing a trend on the added weight that you're adding to an already heavy car is seriously affecting the raceability of the cars.
Well, Ed Carpenter said teams are spending a lot of money to make our racing worse. I mean, he is flat out blaming the hybrid, and he's a team owner, so it says a lot when you have a team owner saying something.
Correct.
And he can speak his mind because of that. And
a guy that's a driver as well. I mean, he was on track over the weekend.
And caught up in the chaos of the end of race 2. like you said, I agree. I'm not ready to blame the hybrid for all of the woes in terms of on-track product, but we now have 3 races where we have yet to have an on-track pass for the lead. And don't talk to me about pit cycle stuff.
Yeah, no, that doesn't count.
I'm talking a true on-track pass for the lead. You had the fact that there was no tire deg, and cars had to pit in race 2, lap 90. Meanwhile, normally in this race, tires start to fall off around lap 50 or so. So
at most, yeah.
Yeah, so like this is a dramatic shift in what we've seen at Iowa. And you just hope they can figure this out, because you still have Gateway and you still have Nashville and Milwaukee. So that's 4 oval races, because Milwaukee's a double header to close out the season, let alone the fact that, I mean, we haven't seen excellent racing with the hybrid yet. We did see a great battle for the win between Pato O'Ward and Alex Palou at Mid-Ohio, but that was it. So either the hybrid power, which they said they would turn up gradually, and I'm not sure if it was turned up for Iowa. I don't think so. But either way, you have to increase power or provide softer tires. But ultimately, the buck stops with IndyCar, right?
Yes.
You can say everyone played a role, whether it's the track, NASCAR putting the resin down. NASCAR owns the track.
We posted it on Twitter earlier this week. I'm past blaming NASCAR, because they have to do what's best for their show at every track that they go to. They are being proactive in trying to help their racing. IndyCar doesn't seem to be doing the same thing. And I understand that NASCAR has wealth more resources in terms of finances to spend the money to do this, but I'm done saying, well, it's NASCAR's fault. They ruined Texas. They ruined Iowa, blah, blah, blah. It's up to IndyCar to make sure that the show is as good as possible for IndyCar, and they're not doing that. And it almost looks like maybe they shouldn't, and we know why they did in terms of the hybrid. Maybe they just shouldn't have introduced it in the middle of a season, huh?
Well, this is what they had to do, because they didn't meet earlier timelines.
And that's the thing. And I think if they were honest about it and they say, hey, we're trying our best here, but we had to get this unveiled. It was a big, important thing for Honda and GM to do this. But, for Bud Denker to come out and talk about, successful event at Iowa, it just sounds dumb. At least you can say that and follow it up with, we had some issues with on-track stuff that we're going to study and try to figure out. But it didn't even say that. It was like a glowing endorsement of the Iowa weekend. And it's like, it just seems colorblind. It seems like blind to the issue. It's like having your head in the sand type of thing. It's just a dumb thing to say for Bud Denker after a very disappointing 2 races at Iowa.
Well, but they sold nearly 80,000 tickets.
No, how many people are coming back?
Yeah, true.
Especially if you don't have Post Malone and Luke Combs, performing over the weekend. 2 major draws. So I don't know. It is very concerning, at least on the oval side, because like you mentioned, there's 4 more ovals in the schedule. And if you can't race and you can't pass at Iowa, what makes you think you're going to be able to pass at Gateway, Milwaukee, and Nashville? And make no mistake, Gateway and Milwaukee especially are in a little bit different situation in terms of the uncertainty of the future of the event. If you have a stinker at Gateway, is IndyCar back at Gateway? Milwaukee is hinging a lot on that doubleheader. If you have 2 stinkers at Milwaukee, is that the death knell of that event? I mean, who knows? You got away with it at Iowa. I don't think you can get away with it at Gateway, Milwaukee, and Nashville.
Yeah, I think the other thing is when Alex Palou even says something negative, that says a lot, right? Calling it MotoGP on dirt. I mean, it says it all to me he is willing to say something, because normally he's a very happy-go-lucky kind of personality, right? And he's not one to put anything on blast. But for him to say something, I think says a lot.
Well, especially
Pato O'Ward said he was bored.
Yeah, I mean, on a short oval, if you're bored, there's a big problem, And even Scott Dixon saying, and he was a little bit more political earlier in the weekend, saying it's a different Iowa than what we're used to. I mean, some drivers minced words. Some guys just shot from the hip, and all of them had the same message. And to me, the lack of reaction from IndyCar, other than Bud Denker saying it was a successful weekend, is concerning to me. They don't outwardly need to say anything and everything, but it'd be nice to say, hey, we're looking at over what happened at Iowa. We're going to try to rectify it for Gateway and Milwaukee, et cetera, because I don't know what you expected. You're going to Iowa in July. It's not going to be 75 degrees.
No.
No. So you're going to be St. Louis in August. I mean, it's going to be hot. Okay. You're going to Milwaukee in what, August?
Yeah, August and September.
You'll be lucky if it's under 80 degrees.
Yes.
So it's going to be warm in Milwaukee. So where is IndyCar's urgency to get this figured out? Maybe it is internally, and that'd be great, but it'd also be reassuring if outwardly they were saying, yes, this is something we're looking into and it's of paramount importance.
Well, and I'll be curious to see what comes out of this weekend at Toronto, whether they made changes or whether they acknowledge it. That will be, I think, the testament of where they see things going.
So,
and NASCAR's coming back to Iowa.
Yes, it wasn't a one-off thing.
Yeah, it's the plan. It's not official because the Cup schedule isn't out yet, right? But
they'll be back.
There's no expectation they're not coming back. It was a successful event, as we all expected it to be, and thankfully, it doesn't sound like it was so detrimental for IndyCar ticket sales, because
at least in the short term.
Yeah, we'll see what it does long term.
And that's my thing is. With two stinkers at Iowa, how many people that were maybe looking at Gateway to go are now hesitating, or that were looking at Milwaukee and thinking about getting tickets are hesitating because of the stinkers you had at Iowa? And that's my concern. And I thought about it on the way in here to record the podcast is this weekend, Formula One is back in action. And this is the first time that I can remember ever in a weekend with IndyCar and Formula One that I am looking forward to the Formula One race more than I am the IndyCar race.
Where's F1 at?
Hungary, maybe?
They at Spa?
I have no idea where they're at this weekend. I think they're at the Hungaroring, I think, this weekend. Just because, and this is, I'm not saying that F1 has surpassed IndyCar in terms of competition and stuff, but in the short term, if you take the last 4, 5, 6 races, I've been more entertained watching Formula One than IndyCar. I'm not making any big sweeping judgments. I'm just saying heading into this weekend between Toronto and the Hungaroring, I'm looking forward to watching F1 more.
I'll say this. The British GP, in my opinion, is the best track for F1. I get that Monaco is the status thing. I think the British GP is actually their biggest event. Yeah, based on the racing on track and the crowds.
And the history, of course.
And the history.
Also
note that it's an old airfield. That's why it's a better racing facility.
Yes, which is pretty cool.
I think that's a big factor. But for IndyCar at Toronto, I enjoy the Toronto race. It's a race I always expect chaos to reign. And I say rain with an EIG, not an AI.
Hopefully not the rain they've gotten
because
this week.
They got nearly 4 inches of rain earlier this week, and there was flooding on Lakeshore, which is part of the course at Exhibition Place. So hopefully when we get to later this week and practice and everything runs on time. But IndyCar's in a spot where you have a Peacock-only race, so you're completely off the radar.
Yeah, I forgot that, too. Speaking of that, did we ever see TV ratings for Iowa?
I have not. Now, we'll get to TV ratings for Mid-Ohio later, which were very positive.
Yes.
But have yet to see anything for Iowa yet. Obviously, the race on Saturday night being on CNBC, everyone understands why.
Right.
And it never moved over on Sunday, even though they said it was going to, right? It stayed on NBC the whole time on Sunday?
Yes.
So,
yep.
I mean, that's a positive, but all in all, it sucks that we're talking about the on-track product and not talking about drivers who had good weekends and things like that. That the first thing is this weekend, in terms of an on-track perspective, was a disaster.
Yeah, that's putting it plainly. It was a disaster. The drivers said as much in so many words. It was just not an entertaining weekend. And when you have such a bad product on track, the fact that you have a doubleheader hurts even more. Because most tracks, you get through a stinker, you move on. But we had to come back and do it Sunday and an even worse race than Saturday. So, especially with, over the years, the kind of racing we've had at Iowa, I think that magnified just how bad it was this past weekend, because we've seen some absolute bangers at Iowa over the years. And this is where we're at. And it's just too easy. and misguided to blame NASCAR. IndyCar needs to do a better job, whether it's on-site testing, on-track testing, sims, whatever, to ensure that at tracks you go to in which NASCAR is also going there, that you put on a good show and a good product and figure out the tire deg issue, the tire formula, figure out what you need to do to make these cars more raceable with the weight of the hybrids in there. All this stuff that should have been done prior to the hybrid going in and showing up at Iowa to race.
To put it simple, over the weekend, you had 2 lead changes, race 1. In race 2, you had 7.
But how many were pit cycles?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So, and you didn't have a single on-track pass for the lead. That sums up the weekend for me.
Yeah, brutal.
It was not enough. Let's get to other elements of the weekend. So I'll get to my number 2, and I got to give a shout out to Santino Ferrucci.
Yes, sir.
He was excellent. He was 6th in race 1, 11th in race 2, but especially in race 1. He got a penalty, and we saw a lot of these penalty calls over the weekend where on restarts, you're not allowed to move out of line. You have to follow the car in front of you. And
right.
So he got a penalty, went a lap down at least. Was it 2 or was it just 1? I think it was just one. So he had to battle back as he dropped to, I think, like 20th or 22nd, ends up getting a 6th place finish. And then in race 2, finished 11th. Moved up spots in both races. He was outstanding as we would have expected him to be. And he's now 10th in the championship. And another top 10. So he's at the highest point, I believe, since Ayrton Dare.
I think so.
And Dare was the last driver to finish in the top 10 in points for a full season. He's 10th through 11 races, which I believe Marshall Pruitt's saying that Sato was also 10th through 11 races in 2013. So it's just been an outstanding season for Ferrucci, and that continued on the ovals.
I mean, look at the guys that he's ahead of in points. I mean, Felix Rosenqvist, Marcus Ericsson, Grosjean, VK, Marcus Armstrong. I mean, just very, very impressive. And just when you think, and we talked about it in our mid-season reviews, if he could finish in the top 12 in points, it'd be massive for Foyt. I mean, right now he's in 10th, and with 4 ovals to go, which we're confident in saying those are Ferrucci's specialty. I mean, he has a chance to stay in that top 10.
So here's the breakdown. So Ayrton Dare in 2002 was the last Foyt driver to finish in the top 10. His 7 top 10s, most for the team since 2011, and the team record for top 10s in a season, 10, set by Robbie Gordon. This was back in kart in 1993. That from Tony D. Indy. So that goes to show you how successful and how great he has been in year 2. Remember last year, he was 3rd at Indy, and that was it. He didn't have a single top 10 outside of that.
Right.
And so they made a huge jump here in year 2.
Hasn't had a top 5 yet this year, but the consistency has been there since the Indy GP, where he finished last or next to last, I think. He has had a worse finish of 15th with 5 top 10s. And that has been exceptional for Santino Ferrucci and AJ Foyt Racing. So congratulations to them. Just when you think, okay, this is the apex of what they're going to do, Ferrucci comes out and has another good race. And we'll see if he can continue. I mean, he's 26 points behind Joseph Newgarden in points, Caleb.
It's wild.
It's pretty wild. We know that Joseph Newgarden has now had the season that is expected of him.
Didn't lead a lap at Iowa.
Not at all. Had a 3rd and a 7th, but the further away we get from St. Pete, the less I pay attention to that result. The fact of the matter is Santino Ferrucci has finished better than Joseph Newgarden in 3 of the 6 races since the Indianapolis 500. And that is very impressive. And he, heading into Toronto, sits just 26 points behind Newgarden in points. That's how good he's been.
It's wild. What's your number 2?
Number 2 take is another lost opportunity for Colton Herta. And I know, bad luck always seems to come in it, but the guy led 86 laps on Sunday and wasn't able to get the dub. And partially you look at it as, okay, bad luck again, but it's just another example of not maximizing your opportunities with Colton Herta. We saw Pato O'Ward do that at Mid-Ohio. Had an opportunity, maximized it, won the race. Colton Herta starting on pole in a race that passing was at a premium, leads 86 laps, and still can't win. Can't even get a podium.
I mean, he had very bad luck on when he pitted.
Very true. I mean, but it just seems like another missed opportunity for this team in general. And I know bad luck is something, but dang, it's just par for the course for this team and for Colton Herta.
It's weird because this is a team that has been very competitive. Obviously, Ericsson had a bad start, but his post-Indy, he's been what you expected him to be. Kirkwood's been consistent.
Yeah.
But the fact that all three drivers are, are they all in the top 10 in points, or is Ericsson just
Ericsson is in 12th.
Okay. So 2 of the 3 top 10 in points. Ericsson, I would say you reset his season post-Indy 500. He's been where you expected him to be.
Right.
But they have no wins. They have multiple poles. They have no wins.
4 podiums. 4 out of 33 possible. They only have four podiums.
And you go to a street circuit this weekend where you expect Andretti to be competitive because they're generally pretty good on street circuits. So you just wonder, is it just a matter of time with a win, or have they missed their opportunity? Because Herta's been so close, almost a half dozen times this season in terms of competing for a win in some sort.
It feels like over the last couple years, with every passing season, the distance between Ganassi and Penske and Andretti continues to grow. And I don't know if that's just me. I know there's circumstances that are out of their control, but I also know that they don't seem to maximize the opportunities when they're there. They continue to have issues either mechanically or in the pits or on track. I feel like 2-3 years ago, we were more confident in saying that Andretti was that third best team, and the gap, it was substantial, but it wasn't massive. I just feel like that gap is getting bigger. If you looked at Andretti and McLaren, I would say they're going in opposite directions. I think McLaren has underperformed, but I feel like it's cutting the gap between Penske and Ganassi. Now, granted, that gap is still tremendous, but I think McLaren is doing a better job at closing that gap than Andretti is. And Kyle Kirkwood, is he that guy that can break out? And we kind of looked at this season as being the season that we see him maybe take the reins as that top driver at Andretti. That hasn't happened. He doesn't have a single podium this year, Kyle Kirkwood. He's 7th in points. So with the bad luck may have bit Colton Herta in race 2 at Iowa, but overall, all encompassing this season, it's been a disappointment, particularly with Kyle Kirkwood, a guy that's a race winner from last year. And you felt this year could be a dude that wins multiple races, doesn't even have a podium through 11 races.
It is surprising. I mean, I don't know what to say because it feels like they're always on the cusp of something, and Toronto, for sure, I'm sure is going to be that same thing where they're going to qualify well, maybe even win a pole.
Right.
And we'll see what happens with the race. But yeah, look, you have a championship battle where Will Powers won twice, Alex Blow's won twice, Scott Dixon's won twice, Pato O'Ward's won twice. Yes, Scott McLaughlin has won twice as well, but he's probably too far back.
Yeah, I'd say so.
That's it.
65 points back.
Herta's been consistent for the most part, but not been able to capitalize. You got to win races, right? Plural.
Yes, you have to win races.
That's a whole team looking for their first win in the season still.
And it's a disappointment. What's your number 3?
My number 3, let's talk Stingray Robb. He tied his season best result in race 1. Then obviously we know what happened at the end of race 2. Not his fault. There's nothing you could have done. 109 Gs on the impact. I mean, that's unbelievable. Going up in the air, he said he could see the catch fence when he was, which has
got to be scary, really scary.
That's scary. And then he kind of passed out briefly after he came back down. It's good that he's okay. He's cleared to drive this weekend. I I'm just glad he's okay. I guess that's kind of my takeaway, because that was vicious.
Well, once again, the aero screen
save Kyle Kirkwood, save Stingray Robb.
Just another example of a what if the aero screen wasn't there, and even a what if it was just the halo. You don't know. And as much as we criticize the IndyCar series at certain points, you'll never hear us criticize the series in reference to the aero screen. I know it's made the car heavier, and even with the new iteration of the aero screen, either that's come or is coming, it's lighter, so that'll help. But we've never criticized the presence of the aero screen, and that was evidenced again at Iowa in terms of the necessity of that thing.
And we're ready for your number 3? It's
hard
to remember where we're at.
Let's talk about the saga that is Jack Harvey and how he was allowed to race in race 1. Somebody explain to me how he was allowed to do in a situation in which he did not want to race. And yet IndyCar is, no, you can't put a sub in that hasn't turned any laps this weekend on track. So Jack Harvey has to go out, race 28 laps before he brings it in, finishes 25th, and then they're able to get Connor Daly in the car on Sunday.
This was a start and park for medical reasons.
Yes.
That also, unfortunately, because of how the rules are set up, was also for points reasons. I mean, he had to start the race. He gave it his all. His lap times were competitive when he was on track, from what I've read. Marshall Pruitt said he talked with Jack over the weekend, and Jack had to turn his entire body. He couldn't turn his neck, to turn his head. That's how bad it was. That's scary. Now, here's the thing. IndyCar cleared him to drive, so in their eyes, everything's fine.
He is fine, but when the driver himself says he's not cut out to drive, I understand why the rule is there. You don't want, just bringing in a ringer, right, that you can put in with no time on. I get it, but if it's a medical issue, then there has to be some sort of loophole, right?
Discretion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be some sort of discretion.
If a driver is telling you, I'm not healthy enough to drive the car, and IndyCar is saying, yes, you are, that's an issue to me. There should be some sort of guideline, if that's the case, to allow Connor Daly to step in or whatever. And I get why they had to start Jack Harvey for leader circle and all that stuff. I get it, but there has to be a better way. I mean, there was no reason why Jack Harvey should have been in the seat on Saturday night. IndyCar clearing him is just kind of adds more insult to injury. I'm like, the guy couldn't turn his head, and you cleared him? Like, what's that say? And we've had questions about IndyCar's procedures with, concussion protocol and stuff as well over the years. Like, he felt like he was not healthy enough to drive, but the series said differently. Just a weird situation overall.
It's one of those where you find a weird gap in the rule book that kind of just shows where you need to make some correction.
Yeah,
for the
probably
future.
Reword some things in that to not allow that to happen. But I felt bad for Jack Harvey, felt bad for Connor Daly, quite frankly, having to go out on a track that he had not yet driven on in its current iteration with the hybrid and the repave and all that stuff, and finished last, only got 140 laps in before the car had a mechanical. But just a bad situation for both drivers, Jack Harvey and Connor Daly, over the weekend.
Yeah, and the fact that, I mean, it went from being, Connor Daly's going to replace Jack Harvey to, no, he's not, and all that mess on Saturday night. It's just glad that everyone's okay after all of this. We can move forward.
Somebody else, too, that I want to point out, how about Catherine Legge over the weekend? Didn't factor in either race, but finished 497 out of a possible 500 laps. Was 17th on Saturday, I think, and 20-something on...
One of the days she got a penalty for being out of line on the restart, along with, again, a handful of other drivers.
Which was...
Ferrucci got it, Lundqvist got it.
I've never seen that called that often.
They don't allow you to pop out anymore. So that's
and I understand the urgency because...
You can't pass.
You can't pass. The only time you could pass was on restarts, and I get it. But I thought Catherine Legge did a good job I always kind of root for her when she's in the field. I think there's a soft spot there for whatever reason, and I thought she did an admirable job over the weekend.
And I did read, and I forget who put this out there, but she could be going to NASCAR to run some races with the partnership with ELF or ELF as well later in the future. That's something they are exploring. So keep that in mind for the future if that's something she does. She said on the broadcast, potentially taking them to do stuff in NASCAR or other racing series. And
Gotcha.
Did they do the drone show again? Did I see that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Very cool.
Yep.
Very cool.
Very much so.
Overall, again, Hy-Vee does a great job. It's great the IndyCar's back at Iowa.
Good to see them re-up.
Yeah, they
re-upped. There's been some questions about would they, if now with them supporting the Cup race.
But overall, just unfortunately, the on-track product didn't match and wasn't a showcase. Because remember, this is an event that I didn't see a total this year, but I think last year it was all 50 states, if I'm not mistaken, that attended last year. So you're drawing a lot of non-IndyCar fans, and for IndyCar to put on a bad show, it's just unfortunate.
It's not a good look. It could impact Iowa in the future in terms of attendance. I think it definitely could impact Gateway and Milwaukee and Nashville this season for people that were looking into maybe going into one of those races or multiple races and seeing how the hybrid drives at Iowa, be like, question it a little bit in terms of financially spending the money to go see what effectively was a parade for back-to-back days at Iowa.
All right. If you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, you can sign up for the email list. It is free. We'll send you emails for new episodes, any special announcements as well. Also, you can check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers available for you on there. You can reach us on social media, IndyCar Podcasts on Instagram, on Twitter /X, on Facebook. Just search for New Track Record. You can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. And you can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Again, starting at just $1 per month on there. So appreciate your support on there. And as always, you can download and listen into the podcast on your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Overcast, Castbox, wherever you listen to podcasts, download and listen in for free. And if you live in the Fort Wayne area, episodes are played a shortened version Saturday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. on WELT 95.7 FM. All right, mailbag time, Justin. We have a ton to get to. We'll start, as always, with Rate the Race.
Ooh.
Stuff. So we'll do each race.
Okay.
So let's start with race 1.
Race 1 was a 4.
I agree.
For me.
That's the number in my head.
Okay.
There was just enough intrigue with late race crashes and restarts to make you think something could happen, and the fact that Plo crashed out made you want to keep watching to see if, for example, if Pato won, then he would cut that points deficit at that point down to like 25 or something. So there was intrigue there. Race 2.
3.
Yeah, I'm going to go 2.5.
I mean, there wasn't much at all on Sunday. You felt like, for better or for worse, after Saturday, you felt, okay, if they can come back and put a better show on it, it was worse on Sunday. Not as much intrigue, as you mentioned. Without Pelot struggling, it didn't add that storyline in terms of somebody could even cut that lead into more. The fact that Will Power won, I guess, was a story, first oval win in 5 years. But overall, it was a pretty dismal weekend. So 4 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday for me.
Yeah, and I said 4 Saturday, 2.5. And our listeners largely agree with us. Race 1, Rate the Race, the average was 2.98.
Ooh.
Race 2, 2.52. This is historic low stuff.
Lows. And I think sometimes we always talk about grading on a curve. I think some of that has to do with the memory of so many good races at Iowa. Is when it's bad,
it's really
bad because we remember how good it can be and has been over the years.
Well, and a lot of people were pointing out this reminded them of Richmond 2009. To me, my first thought was, and I get that it's not an equivalent kind of track, but my first thought was Texas 2020, the first race back that season, and you couldn't pass.
No.
And this felt like either of those two examples, I think, are good examples of races you'd love to forget because there just wasn't intrigue. And what sucked with Texas in 2020 is it was IndyCar's first race of the season. They come back after the pandemic. It's a night race. It's on NBC. You hope to get some buzz, and it's bad. Richmond 09 was crazy because Richmond 2008 was wild. You had Conquest leading the race.
How about that?
Jaime Camara led like 80 laps or something crazy. I don't know if you remember that name.
Vaguely.
But it was a wild race, Richmond 2008, and then you come back in 2009 and it's a parade. So,
and it's kind of ruined Richmond since in terms of getting back on the schedule. We were close a couple years ago, but that kind of doomed IndyCar and continues to hover above the series and the track. That race.
Ironically, they were going to return for 2020.
Yes.
Did not happen, obviously, due to the pandemic. But yeah, they didn't race after 2009 there. So it goes to show how important it is that they got an extension at Iowa. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, you got to figure it out. You have got to figure this out.
All right. Other entries in the mailbag. Of course, a ton of thoughts, a ton of people with their opinions on this race, this track, everything that did and did not happen over the course of the weekend. So we start, and you posted about Firestone. How do they screw up with lights?
I mean, it was
and the blistering and
different ends of the spectrum.
Here's the thing: this is with the added weight, and they brought a softer compound. They changed the downforce settings for the cars, and still was a bust. A couple of replies here. Lynn _IndyCar said the major problem is the repave that was done right before NASCAR, which totally changed the baseline of the tire that Firestone was bringing to Iowa. Yeah,
but we get that.
There. But they tested post repave.
Now, granted, it was 75 as opposed to 95.
But you would not expect that weather.
You got to anticipate that. You can't pray that it's going to be 75 degrees in July in Iowa.
Just like for the Indy 500, you can't expect, it's going to be 60 and cloudy. Yeah, that happened in 2013, and that's it.
Do you think that the focus to make sure that the package for the Indianapolis 500 is as good as it possibly can be, for good reason, then is to the detriment of every other oval on the schedule? Because there is no like oval to Indianapolis on the schedule.
Yeah, they don't have, they run short ovals. They don't have intermediate ovals. They don't have a big super speedway.
Ovals. Yeah, I mean, I guess Nashville is a little over a mile. Is that what Nashville is? 1.2?
Just over.
But I think there's an enormous effort by the series and its partners to put a really good show on at the 500. And I totally get that. But are the massive amount of resources that go into the 500 then to the detriment of every other oval? Because the 500 is the most important race, as it should be, but you lack resources to then get proper testing, proper information, all that stuff with all the other ovals.
I mean, I'd agree with you, but they did a tire test. It's not like they didn't try here.
Yeah, but do you need to do multiple tests? You need to...
Clearly, they didn't do enough testing.
Correct.
With the hybrid units focused on the racing, it was focused on reliability.
That's a good point. So,
which I get, you want it to be reliable,
right?
But I feel like they should have done a testing program with a driver who's not full-time in the series, and have a Honda test driver and a Chevy test driver so that you don't have people complaining about advantage, which thankfully it's not played out, in my opinion, that people who had, Penske, Ganassi, Andretti, McLaren, I get that those are the teams winning all the races anyway, but it doesn't seem to me that they've had some massive advantage by doing more extensive hybrid testing than the other teams.
And I think there's
those teams would probably disagree with me.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think that's been a factor, thankfully.
I do think, and this is a point that I haven't heard anywhere else, is the fact that IndyCar goes to so many different types of tracks, even the short ovals are very different, it is very difficult for Firestone to find that sweet spot for every single track. NASCAR, people say, well, you go to a bunch of cookie cutter mile and a halves. Well, you know what? The tire that works at Kansas is also going to work at Phoenix. That's also going to work at Homestead. That's also going to work at New Hampshire. I mean, just throwing a bunch of tracks out there is a lot of tracks are so similar that they're going to work at the different places. Talladega is going to work at Daytona, right? So you don't have that in IndyCar, and that's good. We don't go to a bunch of cookie cutter tracks, but at the same time, it's very, very difficult to find that best setup for every single venue you go to.
The flip side is NASCAR has 1, maybe 2, or even 3 races a year where the tires simply don't work at a track.
Correct.
IndyCar doesn't have that.
Usually.
The reliability is there. The tires work fine.
Yeah.
They just didn't degrade, whereas NASCAR has races seemingly every year where they have to have mandatory pit stops after every 15, 20 laps or something like,
cautions.
2008 Brickyard 400, reimagined, I guess, reincarnated. Lynn underscore IndyCar also pointing out that the lights tire test was canceled due to rain, so that impacted them as well. Poet Shevchenko saying, on average, the tires of the 2 Series were perfect. Yeah, they could just find that middle baseline.
Right.
Curtis Boggs saying, come on, man, Firestone has done more for IndyCar than just about any organization on the planet. They have a proven track record of providing extremely safe racing tires. They will learn, they will improve, as they always have. No need to put them on blast.
Well, I think they deserve some blame. I mean, that's fine. We're not saying Firestone's terrible.
We're not questioning the safety or reliability.
Right.
They just didn't bring a good racing tire for the weekend.
They
even after adjusting to a softer
for
compound.
both series. They screwed up.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Just figure it out. Firestone, IndyCar, figure it out. Invest some money into testing, into sims, whatever you need to do to figure this out. Because NASCAR's not going away. Okay, so they're still going to be racing at Iowa. They're still going to be racing at Gateway. People talking about clamoring for other ovals. Maybe if you go back to Homestead. I mean, NASCAR races at Homestead. So there's very little ovals that IndyCar is going to race at that are just IndyCar. And they need to figure out. They need to figure out how to cohabitate because NASCAR is not going away.
You posted this poll, and it's a great question. Who do you blame for the disastrous on-track weekend for IndyCar at Iowa Speedway? Just over 37% of you said NASCAR, nearly 29% said IndyCar, nearly 29% said Iowa Speedway, just over 5% of you said other. A few replies here to get to. Jay Blasteri said combination of track changes for NASCAR, Firestone tires with no deg, and hot weather. Also, because underscore race saying, hard to say, I think NASCAR owns the track, right? Yes, they do. NK Harden, I think Firestone should shoulder a lot of the blame as well. Townsend Bell mentioned it in race 2 that drivers were dying for new tires after 50 laps last year. Now they could go 80 to 90 with no issue. We also used to see new tires give you a massive speed advantage, not this year. That's what made Iowa great, right? Look, one of the issues during these races, and we didn't talk about this, the leaders weren't lapping cars.
Correct.
They would get, within a second, half a second, and then they'd back off so they could save their tires. Go figure.
Yeah.
So, when you're not lapping cars, that's a problem. People are getting lapped on pit cycles or having an issue and falling laps down. You should be lapping cars pretty quick at Iowa Speedway. With 27 cars on track, it's 875 of a mile? Is that correct? I always forget.
0.875. Yeah.
So you should be lapping people 20, 30 laps in, and that simply was not the case over the weekend. For IndyCar writes, I think there are several factors to blame here. I think Firestone missed the mark on the tires. The repave didn't help things either. Hard to point the finger at the moment. Hunter's Way 67 ranked them Firestone number 1, IndyCar number 2, NASCAR number 3. Jeremy from HBG saying, I hope they made money because nothing else this weekend went well. Poor tire decision, poor repave decision, letting a driver clearly not able to perform get in a car, and then having him qualify 3 times. Yeah, we didn't talk about that.
That's true.
Frustrating experience. Yeah, qualifying was wild because Herta had pole in a race, but the hybrid didn't work, and Harvey also didn't have the hybrid working, and he requalified. Herta did not after getting in line. That was a whole experience. Qualifying is more entertaining than the races, sadly.
Unfortunately.
Skyscraper Tree 1
and
said...
entertaining kind of for the wrong reasons.
Where to Firestone button? Yeah, I agree. Mo44 President said, blame everyone, but blame IndyCar the most for continuing to be so reliant on Firestone to save them with better tires. And the real problem is the 12-year-old spec chassis is not allowing for a speed differential between the top and bottom of the field. That is where it ultimately comes down to. Excellent point.
And I don't know if this leads into another conversation or what about the chassis, because we continue to hear, and even reading the Marshall Pruitt's mailbag on Wednesday morning as we record here Wednesday, is talking about how more and more difficult it is becoming for teams to spend an average of $8 million a year per entry. And my thing is with that is we have 27 full-time cars on the grid. You cannot tell me that it is next to impossible to get $8 million when we're seeing 27 full-time cars. I think IndyCar is thinking they're protecting the current owners, team owners, as opposed to doing what's best for the sport. If they say tomorrow, hey, new cars coming in 2027, teams, you're going to have to invest in this, blah, 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 blah. And teams are saying, we can't put out 27 cars. We're going to have to drop to 22 total. There's nothing being lost there. That's fine. I think the overall competitiveness of the series dictates the fact that you need a newer chassis, and you cannot continue to be held hostage by certain team owners that cry foul every time you try to bring new technology or newer equipment into the series based on cost. Because when's the last time we had 27 car fields? 15 years?
Yeah, you go back to 2008.
I mean,
when you had reunification, that's the last time we had fields like this.
We're not sitting on 18 full-time cars and teams complaining about how much it is to compete in the IndyCar series. We have 27 full-time cars, and we're adding 2 more next year. We're going to be close to 30 full-time cars.
Do you buy we're going to see everyone? I don't buy it.
Well, I think there's going to be some subtraction with other teams. I don't
think we see 29 full-time entries at St.
Probably not, but what I'm saying is there's another team coming in that if they were in this year would make 29 full-time cars. So don't give me this. It's becoming more and more difficult to field cars and field because you have 27 of them in the field. And I think IndyCar sometimes worries so much about the short term and, oh my gosh, Ed Carpenter Racing may have to go away, or they're going to have to drop a car, or Juncos is going to have to drop a car because it's becoming more expensive. That's racing. Racing is expensive, and racing is also really pushing the envelope in terms of technology, and that's what IndyCar's not doing with its chassis. So basically what I'm saying is IndyCar needs to stop worrying about its current owners to the extent of trying to appease them. Certain owners want new cars. Even Dale Coyne, who's probably in the worst position to afford new cars, wants new cars. But they need to push forward and get a new chassis ASAP to fix some of these issues. And you know what? If it loses 4 or 5 full-time entries across the paddock, so be it.
Also, to make the hybrid the most effective, they need a new car. Remember, they had to shoehorn this hybrid unit into the back of the bell housing behind the engine to make it fit in the current chassis.
Yeah.
You design a new chassis, and not only can the hybrid be more effective, but also it will actually be as part of a new chassis, not something you just had to add on. I mean, they're essentially taking a 12-year-old car and adding features.
Right.
So you can do that for so long. Like, you can add a new, take a car. You can add a new display. You can add monitors, say like it's an SUV, and add monitors, behind the front seats, for people in the back seats to watch, movies or whatever. You can add features, right? You could add remote start. You can add that. You can add, can you add heated seats? I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
I mean, you can add features,
right? But
it's still a used car, right? It's still not integrated fully into the vehicle. And that's what IndyCar is doing.
Yeah. We knew this was going to be a problem in terms of adding more, the aero. It is a car not designed to have an aero screen. It's a car not designed to have a hybrid system in it. And IndyCar and its partners have had to be strategic in how they do it. But the basis of the matter is it's an old ass car that wasn't designed to have all this added weight to it, period. And IndyCar needs to say, you know what, team owners, this is what we're doing. And we've heard Mark Miles say it, committed and non-committed, that 2027 is going to be that year. He's
now
also
it's as soon as
2027.
That's the new line.
You know what, team owners? 2027, you're getting a new car. You figure it out. If you have to go from 4 cars to 2 cars, or 3 cars to 2 cars, or 2 cars to 1 car, that's on you. But this is happening.
And you know what's the best way to improve racing? A new formula. That's the best way. Go figure. This from run_mark_run, replying to last week's episode post. Justin's drink of choice whenever Rossi or Connor is mentioned. Haterade. A picture of Gatorade, but it says Haterade. I thought that was great.
Me?
Yeah. You're a hater. You're a hater.
You know. I am on occasion.
This from Lynn_IndyCar saying, wow, the truth hurts. IndyCar, you have a problem here. And these are the numbers from Iowa. You didn't get to these. Iowa race 1, 192 total passes. Iowa race 1 in 2023, 1,502. For position in race 1 in 2024, 100. In 2023, for position, 319.
And we felt like last year's Iowa races weren't the best Iowa races we've ever seen. Yet compared to what we saw this year, like night and day.
This from K-Stan 5001. I had posted this an IndyCar race or a test session talking about race 2, and K-Stan 5001 said, it is a concert.
Well, at least people had fun at the concerts, hopefully, because I think that's what Bud Denker was looking at or must have been talking about in terms of his successful weekend comment.
Yeah. NK Harden saying it's a shame anyone paid money for tickets this weekend.
I actually looked at tickets because one of my favorite musical artists is Luke Combs, and my son is a really big fan of Post Malone. If we could convince my wife to take a 14-year-old to see Post Malone, we thought about going. I looked at tickets, and they were $150. I was like,
for both days or one day?
For one day.
Oh, that's
so
a
we're
lot.
talking, okay, $300 for tickets for both days.
Got to get a
plus
hotel.
hotels, all that stuff, the drive.
Gas
I'm
and
like,
food.
And
you're looking at least $500, probably more.
Yeah, at least. And in
600 really at a minimum.
Hindsight, glad I didn't pull the trigger, because the great unknown, of course, was weather, and it was hot, and it was boring racing. So I am so glad that I didn't pull the trigger. As much as I like Luke Combs and my son likes Post Malone, I don't think it would be warranted to pay that much money to see those two acts, which basically was what I was going to be paying for. Oh, and sweat my ass off.
Yeah. You posted this poll, which is technically still active. Favorite IndyCar team changes to follow. Coin hirings, McLaren firings. So far, nearly 57% of you say coin hirings, 43% say McLaren firings. We will get to more coin hirings here shortly. Jeremy from HBG saying coin missing out on YouTube engagement. Maybe we can get Austin, not Duncan, I know, a YouTuber, I guess, to do a mystery driver unboxing video for Dale, or McLaren is a scam for Teddy Porkchops. JP_Orlowski's 27 says definitely Dale Coyne Racing now, because the man, the myth, the legend, Hunter McElroy racing with them. That's one of the driver announcements. OBX Jody said, I think Dale Coyne is the largest franchise of Sonny's Barbecue. Ironically, Dale Coyne Racing and Sonny's Barbecue quality level is almost a perfect parallel. Ouch.
I've never
Guillermo,
had Sonny's Barbecue. Have you?
I don't think I have. There are a bunch of numbers here on the username, but I far prefer Coyne, as McLaren is destroying careers and underachieving. Dale Coyne, despite the appalling lack of sponsorship, is providing talented drivers a chance. There are some remarkable performances, such as Sowery's at Mid-Ohio. And Karen said Coyne for sure. Real chance we see Buddy Lazier, Robbie Gordon, Milka Duno, or any other random driver from the last 25 years show up some weekend. It's incredible. Harder to predict than the Powerball numbers. And T-Wood Racing said Dale Coyne mystery drivers is preferred, but watch Spam downfall since they did Hinch dirty has been fun to watch. Just proves how good Ganassi and Penske teams really are. I voted for McLaren because I like drama. I'll be honest.
Yeah, and it's usually top-end drama for sure. But I do think that's a great point with the is as much as you and I always point out just how good Penske and Ganassi are, I do think it continues to be a reminder just how good those two teams are, because no matter what anybody else does in this series for the better part of 10 plus years, nobody can get to that level of those two teams.
Well, it's because the car's the same.
You think so?
Yes. Because we saw the car change in 2012 and look what happened. Penske and Ganassi didn't win the championship.
Then that's the last time we had it, right?
Correct. Now, you did have a slight changes with, aero kits, and we saw some changes in that era. You had technically a new car in 2018. You saw different Indy 500 winners, that era. Then you had the aero screen get introduced. You had Ray Hall win a 500. Right. So the hybrid, in theory, with a full season, if it provided enough power, could be that game changer. But Right now, I don't think it provides enough power.
Well, the longer you go with a formula, the more the well-financed and well-run teams are going to figure it out. And that's why in Formula One, you have frequent changes of formulas every, 3-4 years, you'd say. Now, it's easier to do that in Formula One with the money, but it 12 years is an eternity in racing to not change. What the base is the biggest part of the car, of racing, is the chassis itself. And you basically have the same car. And so the longer that is, the more that the top teams are going to figure it out, Penske and Ganassi. And that's where we're at right now.
Yep. That is where we're at. That wraps up the mailbag. Thanks, everyone, for their entries. Time for news and notes as we start to wrap things up for this episode. So we talked TV ratings. We don't have numbers in as we record here on Wednesday morning, July 17th for Iowa. But the good news is we have great numbers for Mid-Ohio. And those numbers, I mean, this is the highest non-Indy 500 numbers we've seen all season. So it's very positive. You have, as far as the initial stuff, you look at what they got at Mid-Ohio, 1.31 million viewers on NBC. That's traditional audience plus digital. Most watched non-Indy 500 broadcast since the 2022 season opener at St. Pete, which got 1.429 million. From Nathan Brown of the Indy Star. Can you imagine getting 1.42? 2022.
I do remember that because people were, this is going to be a massive year for ratings, and it didn't.
And then some more numbers. This from Tyler Wong, 65. So traditional, not including streaming, 1.25 million viewers, up 69% from last year's Mid-Ohio race, which was on USA Network, that got 739,000 viewers. Most watched Mid-Ohio IndyCar race since 2021, which got 1.303 million viewers on NBC. I was at that race.
How about that?
It was a fun weekend.
Now, you look at the Mid-Ohio, and it wasn't because of the racing. I mean,
you had a battle for the lead.
Yeah, but we've seen that before.
It was because it was a lead into NASCAR at Chicago.
Yeah. I think
so, and then people say, oh, there's a race on now. Oh, IndyCar. Mid-Ohio. Oh, this is, you catch the tail end of it.
Right.
You boost the rating.
Yeah, I agree. Plus, with the issue, I mean, did the Chicago race even start on time?
No,
didn't think so.
No,
because of the rain. So.
It was delayed again.
Yeah, so it's a great number, and we should celebrate it. But let's recognize it for what it was. It wasn't because a ton of people all of a sudden decided that what they wanted to do on Sunday afternoon was watch IndyCar at Mid-Ohio. It was people were tuning in early to catch the coverage of the race at Chicago. But hey, we'll take it.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to some silly season stuff. So we mentioned, Hunter McElroy will make his IndyCar debut this weekend with Dale Coyne Racing. Again, he tested with them the Monday after Mid-Ohio, so it's great to see him finally get his shot. He's the 9th driver entered for Coyne this year. This from Tony DeZeno. Team record for most in his 41-year history since his 1984 debut. Previous most was 8 in 2015, but again, only 7 started the race. That was the Rocky Moran Jr. Long Beach practice session, wrist injury, and then Connor Daly, I think, took over the rest of that week.
Okay.
For perspective. But that's first bit of news. It's great to see him get his opportunity. He finished second in lights, what was it, last year? I mean, he's been very deserving of an opportunity, so it's great to see that come to fruition. So he's in the 18. Meanwhile, Toby Sowery will run the number 51 car for Toronto and Portland. So congrats to him on that. We would expect Catherine Legg to run the 51 on the ovals to close out the season.
Okay.
So good news there.
Just thanks for the weekly who's in the seats.
Yes. Who's in the seats.
Coyne.
So meanwhile, silly season stuff. So the Racer mailbag from Marshall Pruitt, Racer.com. Interesting note. So he did a whole silly season article that we thought we'd kind of touch on. There wasn't a whole lot. Maybe Rossi is a possibility for Ganassi. Well, there are a few things at play here now. So Pruitt says the window for Rossi at Penske or Ganassi appears to have passed. So a week later, doesn't seem like that is an option. Meanwhile, the other thing that is interesting, there are reports out there from Brazilian media that I've seen it picked up Jefferson Kern, who covers IndyCar out of Brazil, saying that Meyer-Shank Racing is switching their technical alliance from Andretti to Chip Ganassi Racing for 2025.
If true, it's smart.
Yeah. Now, here's where this gets tricky.
Okay.
So if, say, Shank runs 3 cars and Ganassi goes down to 4, could Rossi be for one of those Shank full-time entries? Because of like leader circle, and remember, like they're not eligible. 2 of the Ganassi entries aren't eligible for leader circle as it is.
Correct.
So would they just farm one out as a kind of a
satellite type?
Yeah, satellite team and have Shank expand? I get this is contingent on a lot of things. For example, number 1, David Malukas has to get that 66 entry into the leader circle.
Right.
At the end of the year.
Of which right now it is.
I haven't seen it updated.
6. Oh, it's not updated?
Yeah, I haven't seen it updated.
Oh, it's not updated
with
Iowa. Dang it. Come on, people.
I think he is in. I think.
Yeah, I don't know. So that'd be the big thing. I mean, could you also see it going to 3 and 4 and maybe Ganassi sending an existing Ganassi driver to Michael Shank Racing? Could it be a Marcus Armstrong that's on the move that goes to Meyer-Shank, but it's a satellite program just to make him eligible or at least another quote-unquote Ganassi driver eligible, something like that. And
speaking of Shank, so they'll have the Tragically Hip on David Malukas' car for the weekend with Sirius XM. The band will also be the Grand Marshals for the event. Canadian band. Have you heard of them?
No, I was going to say, I don't know if I'm supposed to have.
They're a Canadian band. So
hey,
obviously
if it brings in the
they're big in Canada.
That's fine with me.
So that's another note. And other silly season stuff, also reporting Prima has 5 brand new IndyCar chassis. They have a 7-figure spare parts order, a workshop. They're working the best espresso machine available, of course, because they're an Italian team. And they have not had contact with drivers, but they obviously have people like Logan Sargent and Alexander Rossi on their radar.
They are in it to win it, so to speak. I mean, 5 cars. I don't even think a couple teams in IndyCar have 5 cars, 5 chassis. I mean, Prima's in it. Where their funding is coming from is anybody's guess. Do they have such well-funded partners overseas that they're just going to come over here? Who knows? But they are as interesting of an entry into this series as a team in a long time because of the investment being made. When we had Carlin come in, when we had Harding come in, even with Juncos, it was just small. And they were hoping to build. But Prima is coming in and just jumping right into the deep end. And I'm going to be fascinated to see how it goes. Yeah. I'm not saying both cars are going to be in the top 10 next year, but within a couple years, could they be maybe that Ray Hall level? Everywhere but Indy? At least with Ray Hall?
It's a huge jump, and we'll get to Ray Hall in a bit. Also of note from Iowa in terms of silly season, Haley Deegan, who was dropped from her NASCAR team, was at Iowa over the weekend. And could she factor into Andretti, whether it's IndyCar on the ladder or NASCAR on the ladder? That could be something to keep an eye on as well.
Does Andretti have any?
They have Marco running in a lot of truck races.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the truck races in ARCA Menard series. Mostly ARCA Menard series.
Which I feel like that's probably the most likely path for Haley Deegan. She has no open wheel experience.
Correct.
And very little outside of oval experience. I have a hard time thinking she's going to be in Indy Lights next year, for example. I could see a relationship building for trucks or ARCA, even Xfinity, something like that for her. But just because she was at Iowa for IndyCar, doesn't convince me that she's going to be in an open wheel car next year.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we would expect Lewis Foster, who's probably going to win the Lights title, to move up to IndyCar. Where he goes, who knows? I mean, you look at the seats, you have 2 at Prima, 1 at Meyer-Shank, technically available, 2 at Coyne, and then 1 at Ray Hall. Maybe 2.
Yeah.
So that gets you to 6 or 7. Now, we really expect it to be 6. I would be very surprised if David Malukas is not back at Shank when all is said and done.
Particularly with how he's been performing.
Yeah, if he can get some results based on, he's qualified well. A good qualifying position at Mid-Ohio.
Right.
Yes, he did crash out in race 1 at Iowa, but look, if he can get them in the leader circle and get some results, I think he's in that seat next year.
Yeah, you look at Louis Foster and who's leading or who could potentially be out of Indy Lights to go into IndyCar. We've reached a point, and then I think we've moved on from the Indy Lights Championship automatically getting a full-time ride in IndyCar the year after. That's just not realistic anymore. I think when you look at Linus Lundqvist, obviously had to wait a year and then get his opportunity. Christian Rasmussen was
He's
able
had
to
flashes.
get a full-time ride. Yeah. I just don't know right now if there's room for Louis Foster to get a full-time ride next year. I think he's going to be a guy that has come in, is going to take that scholarship money and run a couple races, is going to have to prove himself worthy of getting a full-time ride, because there are so many drivers, whether it's from the ladder, from Europe, from F2, from being out of a seat at the end of this year, or already out of a seat, or out of a seat last year, it's still seeking. So many drivers, so little spots. And it's becoming more and more important to bring that cash as opposed to being a full-time paid seat.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing is technically both Foyt entries are open for next year. Technically. Now, you would think they would pick up the option on Stingray Robb if that car makes the leader circle, or if the funding is so much that they feel set, and you would think they'd want Ferrucci to return.
Do you think with the performance of Santino Ferrucci, if it continues, that there's another team that will make a run at him?
It's a good question, because he has experience in Honda and Chevy. So, in theory, you would think Rahal would with the Hy-Vee car if Hy-Vee stays, which it sounds like they will stay, and potentially 5 Hour Energy could re-up with them as well.
He did okay.
An expanded role
with Rahal.
He was great with Rahal when he filled in,
right,
a couple of years ago, but they didn't pick him.
Yeah,
you look back at it and it feels like a big mistake.
Yeah, but could he be a guy that I think Rahal would be a perfect spot for him to go, because he performed well at Indy. In what year was that? 2021 for Rahal? Yeah, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'd be a great addition to Rahal Lemon-Lanigan.
Well, and he was viewed as an oval specialist for several years, but I think he's debunked that now, finally. Yes, he's great on ovals, right, but it's not like he's not competitive on road courses either. And that was kind of the one thing that people would ding him for, beyond all the controversial stuff in the past. We don't need to dive into that right now, but I think he is a viable option. It just depends on, does he stay at Foyt because he likes the partnership? Also, let's not kid ourselves. Foyt has a better track record at the Indy 500 the last 2 years than Rahal does.
And that's...
And Christian Lugard said as much. The Indy recovery plan that they put in place after last year's Indy 500, with it simply not working in terms of qualifying in the race for this year in the Indy 500, that's why he left the team. He didn't even negotiate.
Right.
Because he saw what happened at Indy, and he was like, all right, I got to leave. And to be quite honest, that's why I don't think Alexander Rossi is going to want to go to Rahal, because if you can't show to be competitive at Indy, the most important race, it's pretty hard to sell your team to these free agent drivers.
Well, and even if Santino Ferrucci was a match at Rahal Letterman-Lanigan, philosophically, we don't know how he gets along with Graham and Bobby. Fact of the matter is Foyt is better than Rahal at Indy. So that would be something that would keep potentially Ferrucci at Foyt if indeed Rahal was looking into him. But that Indy recovery plan, that has turned out to be as effective as the Boston Consulting Group, hasn't it?
There's a blast from the past. I wonder what the Boston Consulting Group has to say about IndyCar racing in new markets. I'd be curious. What their plan is.
Maybe they should go to China.
If you're a newer IndyCar fan, That's from 2011, 2012.
Yeah, go look that up.
Look that up.
It's clear an afternoon and look up that debacle.
They gave us the, was that their recommendations? Is that a result of the failed Boston race?
I think that was part of it. Yeah.
Yep. So who knows?
Among other things.
Yes.
Check it out.
Yes. A couple ticket deals and things. So first off, if you're going to Toronto this weekend, free fan Friday in support of Make-A-Wish. Just make a donation at the gate. Also, Milwaukee Mile, they have a ticket combo, the revved up racing package. You can get tickets for the Hy-Vee Milwaukee Mile 250s and is it Leuna? I don't know. I've heard of it. 175 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at 20% off. They have that package going. Also, single-day tickets on sale for Portland as of now, raceportland.com/tickets. And also Nashville has single-day tickets for sale as well. I'm really worried about this Nashville race.
Yeah.
For Sunday, starting at $95. Now, they do have music, I understand, and Saturday starts at $55, practice, qualifying, and music as well. Saturday, I feel like is fine.
I don't think you'll get very many people at that Nashville race.
Yeah, I'm nervous. I'm very nervous. I wish I could go. I cannot. But
and also, do you look into anything about combining the ticket package? What is it at Milwaukee?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's because.
Would you say that's indicative of them being unable to sell tickets for both, so they're doing a combined? Remembering Texas, right? You could buy the season pass.
Well, that's how it used to be for a lot of NASCAR tracks. In order to get NASCAR tickets, you had to buy the season pass in general, and that's why people showed up to IndyCar at Chicagoland,
correct,
in Kentucky and Texas and Kansas for all those years, is because in order to get NASCAR tickets, you had to. So it's like, well, you might as well go. And then at that time, IndyCar had a great product on ovals with those close finishes. So
now,
I don't know. I wouldn't read too much into it because that's the same promoter and the same track. So why wouldn't you do a combo deal?
Yeah, other than you're not selling as many tickets as you were hoping to for either, so you're just going to combine them now.
And one other track note, Rockingham.
I saw this. I skimmed the article.
The track owner, Dan Levenheim, said he was asked when high-level racing will be returning to Rockingham Speedway. He said soon. That from the Richmond Observer. So keep that in mind.
That's a racetrack that a couple years ago I mentioned as a potential for
and IndyCar gets good TV ratings around that area, I believe.
It's in North Carolina. I mean, they've put in a lot of money into refurbishing that speedway, and I haven't seen IndyCar in particular mentioned with Rockingham, but it's, a mile oval?
I think it's 1.25. I'm not
close.
Sure.
It's a flat it opened as a flat 1 mile oval, got refigured over just over 1 mile in length, seats 34,000. To me, perfect size.
Fit. Yeah.
Right? So, no, not Rockingham in the UK.
No.
But
in the U.S.
The Rockingham in the U.S. I think when we've talked about new ovals, and even a couple years ago when I had heard that they were doing some big-time renovations at that track, I said, why not IndyCar? We haven't heard it yet, but wouldn't be surprised. And you make a good point in terms of the TV ratings.
And Road America has announced their ticket special for 2025. You can get all 4 days because there's action starting on the Thursday for $140. It's a great deal. They have that deal on sale now.
The entire weekend for $140?
Yes. Yeah, it's a great deal.
And they had one, I know it's major musical acts, but it was 1 day for $150 at Iowa.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yes. Meanwhile, we have a race this weekend to preview, too.
Oh, that's right.
Before we get to our tweets of the week and random split air driver of the week. So it's now the Ontario Honda Dealers Indy Toronto, not just the Honda Indy Toronto. Now, details for the weekend. Practice 1 hopefully starts on time at 3 to 4:15 in the afternoon Eastern. Peacock, IndyCar Live, Sirius XM, IndyCar Radio. Practice 2, 10:30 to 11:30 on Saturday morning. Qualifying 2:45 to 4:15. The warm-up on Sunday, 10 to 10:30 in the morning. and the race window 1 to 4 on Peacock. Again, this is Peacock only, so Peacock all weekend. Green flag around 1:30 or so Eastern on Sunday afternoon. You have a pick? You have any thoughts on this race weekend?
It's just I've thought so much about Iowa. I haven't looked ahead very much to what's going on this weekend in Toronto. But who won last year?
Christian Lundgaard.
That's right. Christian Lundgaard did last year. I don't know. Just I always come back to Alex Palou winning a race, right?
I feel like whoever wins, I feel like we will see whether it's Palou, Power, Dixon, or even Pato. I feel like one of those 4 wins, and then whoever picks up that third win first on the season, that's going to be your champion. I feel like that's where we're at in the schedule.
I could see after the misstep from Alex Palou last Saturday and near miss of winning the race, I could see Alex Palou winning this weekend in Toronto.
I'm going to go Scott Dixon just because you chose Palou to mix it up.
All right, then.
Time for tweets of the week, and we have 2. The first one from Scott McLaughlin himself. Colton Herta posting about winning the pole, and the picture, the P1 award sticker, is crooked. And McLaughlin said, "Can we at least stick it on straight, bro? It's crooked on the rear wing." And then the other one, so Nathan Brown had highlighted, we talked about this earlier, passes for position for Iowa race 1, comparing 24 to 23. Too fast, too sickos. Again, you got to remember the Iowa connection. Not a lot of passing after Kirk Ferentz delivered the command to start engines last night.
We should have known,
Kirk
right?
Ferentz, the Iowa football head coach. Yes. Not known for their offense, known for their defense and special teams.
Maybe that changes for Iowa with a new OC finally this year.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
Yes, a fitting command from Kirk Ferentz, considering what we saw on track.
Yes. And one other note I actually forgot to get to. Adam Alexander, this from Adam Stern, seen as the favorite to take over the lead play-by-play commentator role for the CW's NASCAR Xfinity Series coverage.
So where do you think that leaves IndyCar? I mean, would you say Kevin Lee is in a good position?
Kevin Lee, or do they just have Mike Joy do a more full schedule? I don't think so, but
I don't know. And
Kevin Lee would make a lot of sense.
It would. There'd be continuity there. I've said I like Kevin. If
Adam Alexander does Xfinity, he obviously won't have time to do IndyCar.
I think Kevin does a good job. Maybe if a larger sample size, you can continue to broaden and impress me. I notice when Lee's gone.
Yeah,
and maybe that's more putting Lee higher. I'm not looking down on Kevin Lee. He's just different. But if you put Kevin Lee from the jump, maybe it works out. I don't know. Or is there somebody else that Fox is eyeing? But we thought Adam Alexander, he was the natural fit.
Mm-hmm.
And if he goes to CW, that obviously will not mean that he'll be with IndyCar.
All right, time for our random split era driver of the week.
Well, this is a known name. It's just some people may not realize that he was at one point a hot shot driver in the road to Indy, and that's Michael McDowell.
Yes,
long-time Cup driver. Still drive. He's still full-time in Cup, I do believe. Is he with Front Row still? I do believe Front Row Motorsports. But back in the day, he was a very promising open-wheel driver. One Star Mazda, is that what it was? And then went to Champ Car, had just 2 races in Champ Car in 2005 with Rocket Sports Racing.
I didn't realize he actually made Champ Car starts. I always knew the Star Mazda fact. I was like, he didn't start in the split era, but he did.
He did. Had 2 races in 2005 at Surfers Paradise and Mexico City, a 12th and an 11th, and those were the only 2 races. He went from then and made the career decision to go to Grand Am Racing to try to develop into a stock car driver, and it's turned out pretty fruitful for Michael McDowell to be in it for the better part of a decade. It's made over close to 500 starts over 17 years in Cup, with a couple of wins over the course of his career, and really was maybe one of those guys that, I don't know, got away and maybe could have been a star in open wheel without the split, or if reunification had come sooner, but Michael McDowell got the shot after winning Star Mazda, got a couple starts in Rocket Sports Racing, and that was it. 12th and 11th in 2 races, and then moved on into stock cars, and eventually did some Xfinity in 2007, 2008, and in 2009, and then since then has been into the Cup Series, has done some 24 hours of Daytona, leading into the Daytona 500 in February, and continues to race full-time for Front Row Motorsports in Cup. Still just 39 years old. I kind of feel like Michael McDowell older than that, but a native of Phoenix, Arizona, won the Star Mazda Championship in 2004, fed that into 2 races for Rocket Sports Motorsports in kart in 2005, and that was it for Rocket Sports Racing, then got into stock cars. So it's a name familiar to almost everybody who follows racing, but may not know that he did indeed have a couple starts in the split era. Michael McDowell, this week's random split era driver of the week.
2021 Daytona 500 winner and last year's Verizon 200 at the Brickyard on the road course, as NASCAR returns with the Brickyard 400 on the oval this weekend.
Will you watch?
Probably.
Do you expect a better race?
No.
Do you expect a better race than what we saw at Iowa?
Yes.
Which the bar is very low.
We'll be back next week to recap the race at Toronto and the latest and greatest in IndyCar news. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.